Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. So this is kind of an interesting book because most of the books that I read did not make many bestseller lists. Most of them are very scholarly, and some are, quite frankly, kind of obscure. I like to revel in that. I kind of like reading the unpopular stuff or the stuff that isn't, available to the masses. So this book I'm about to review is one of those books that was actually a New York Times bestseller. The most interesting thing about it is I was steadily building my collection of books, but I never found my way in all the years that it was a bestseller to read it. And part of it was because I think I was just being a snob because, well, it's a New York Times bestseller book and I'm not interested in popular writings. But I have to say, this book, Under the Banner of Heaven by Jon Krakauer, is a tour de force. It has to do with the story of the Lafferty brothers. But what's so fascinating about it is he takes the history, he did a lot of research, into Mormonism, the Restoration, the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he kind of weaves the story about Joseph and Brigham Young and the Mountain Meadows Massacre, the Hans Mill Massacre, and then he brings it into the present, or like in the period of the time this book covers, which is in the 80s. Very fascinating stuff, because what he does is he educates the audience on the history of Mormonism. Now, I will tell you that if you're a faithful member, you're going to look at this book and there's going to probably be things in here that you don't really appreciate or disapprove of it. I completely understand that, okay? I'm not here to, undermine anybody's faith. I'm just here to discuss this as an outsider as I see it. But he did a lot of research on Mormonism. I was really surprised by it, and I was actually learned a lot. Like, he talks about Bishop Coyle's dream mine. I had never heard of that. So I did some more research on the dream mine and found it was just an interesting, fascinating story about faith and prophecy and, dealing with the establishment and the church and excommunication. It was an interesting story. But a lot of people who were part of the polygamous groups, the fundamentalist groups within Mormonism, those are the groups that the Lafferty brothers, they ran with that crowd. As a matter of fact, they hung out like with Ogden Kraut, and those people. I don't even think he refers to Ogden Kraut in the book, but it's definitely a known fact that he did. And so the Lafferty brothers, actually, one of them thought that he was the one and mighty strong, and the other one believed that he was. And so that led them to do some terrible, evil things. Murdering, killing a young child. The sister-in-law's name was Brenda, and they killed her and her child because they believed that God commanded them to do it. It's interesting because they used the justification for this, dealing with Nephi and the slaying of Laban. They justified murder under those conditions. That's, of course, a misuse of Scripture. And you can see that if you take a scripture out of context and you run with it, you can end up doing some very terrible things. And we can find that in all religions. We find that in Christianity. We find that in Islam. All of them have a dark side. All of them have their false prophets and their extremists that do evil things to people and use their faith to justify evil actions. The history that this guy gives is really fascinating. Like I said, the way he does the parallel between the past and the present. The mindset of the Lafferty brothers, they were insane. And they were religious extremists to the extreme. Now, a couple things. One of them was actually cellmates for a while with Mark Hoffman, and they seemed to hit it off pretty good, interestingly enough. And I just want to read you a quote because the author is not a believer. He's not... I don't think he's a Christian or anything, but he did grow up in the West, I believe in Oregon, and grew up among Mormons, so he had Mormon friends. At the very end of the book, I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs that I want to read to you about what I find is interesting, because the way he approached writing the story was, in the past, a lot of people would say, well, allegedly Moses received the tablets at Mount Sinai, or allegedly Joseph was visited by the angel Moroni. And we got to understand that when it comes to faith, using that sarcasm is not wise. And I think that he kind of gives us the right way of how to handle it. But then he said, I need to show my hand and explain where I'm coming from because I'm writing about religious faith, and I think he does a really good job in this paragraph. He says, I don't know what God is or what God has in mind when the universe was set in motion. In fact, I don't know if God even exists, although I confess that I sometimes find myself praying in times of great fear or despair or astonishment at a display of unexpected beauty. And I'm going to skip over. This is at the very end of the book. And if I remain in the dark about our purpose here and the meaning of eternity, I have nevertheless arrived at an understanding of a few more modest truths. Most of us fear death. Most of us yearn to comprehend how we got here and why, which is to say, most of us ache to know the love of our Creator. And we will no doubt feel that ache, most of us, for as long as we happen to be alive. So there's somebody that has a God-shaped box in their heart, I guess you could say. So that's where he's coming from. But like I said, give some interesting perspective on things. Let me give you the official Mormon Book Reviews review. Under the Banner of Heaven. Throughout the years of me enthusiastically researching the Restoration, I found that I sometimes had a few blind spots. This book was one of them. While it sat for years on the bestseller list, I just kind of ignored it. My ego was one of, I don't read popular books for the masses. Well, I felt a little bit humbled by this book when I finally read it. While many may disagree with his conclusions, he did do his homework. He did years of research and interviews, and it really shows while he weaves the past with the present. Mr. Krakauer is a fun writer to read, and I think it's worth getting on this ride. Giving it 4 out of 5 stars. All right, thanks for everybody for all your feedback I've been getting. It's been fantastic. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification too, and there will be a link to this book in the description. You guys have yourself a great day.